What is up, guys? It is Freddie Knows Ball here, back with a brand new video. We've got text structure and purpose for you today, guys. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit dressed up today, got a dress shirt on, and that's because we need to be sophisticated today, guys. This lesson starts to get into longer passages and questions where you need to think more deeply, and so I had to dress appropriately, you know? Without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so text structure and purpose is made up of three main question types. So the first one is main purpose, which is pretty self-explanatory. And it's basically where you have to find out why the author wrote what he did, or like why he's trying to convey that message. And so the strategy for this question type is similar to transitions. If you guys watched my last video on transitions, you had to build your own solution. You had to make up your own word to put in the blank. For main purpose, it's very similar. It can be anything from one word to a full sentence of like a summary of what you think the answer choice will say. And the reason you do this is because if you go into the answer choices blindly, they're gonna trap you. All the answer choices on the SAT are designed to look appealing if you don't have an answer already in your head. So that's why it's so important to come up with a solution before looking at the answer choices. Honestly, I think all of you guys have the discipline necessary in order to do this, especially if you practice, right? Practicing, knowing what you're going to look at and when will definitely help you get the discipline to make your own solution before you look at the answer choices. So without further ado, let's get into the
ball knowledge.
On main purpose questions, there will be this thing above it called a blurb. Skipping the blurbs during a main purpose question is like going into a boss fight when you don't even know the controls, like you haven't even played the tutorial. Please read the blurb when you are doing main purpose questions because they give you context to what you're about to read, and it helps you better understand the text, which can give you a better solution that you come up with in your head, which will more accurately lead to you choosing the right answer. Now, with that said, let's get right into the first practice question. Today, composer Scott Joplin is mainly celebrated for his catchy ragtime pieces, Maple Leaf Rag and The Entertainer. However, by overlooking his less famous works, listeners will miss the full range of Joplin's creativity. For instance, his waltz, Pleasant Moments, and his opera skillfully blend ragtime and classical music. These masterpieces deserve as much fame as Joplin's biggest hits. So this is a main purpose question because we can see it says which choice best states the main purpose of the text. That is the dead giveaway on how to identify this question type. Now, what would I think that the answer would say? It's talking about this composer and his more mainstream works, but it's also saying like the less popular works are also important and that you're missing his full creativity if you don't look at his less famous works. So, and then he gives examples as to that. So my solution would be you have to listen to the underground songs too to see the full range of his creativity. Guys, your boss can be in whatever language you want, in whatever slang you want. I literally said, gotta listen to underground songs too to see the full creativity, right? Like you can literally say that. You can say underground matters. You could say niche matters. You could say popular is cool, but overlooking underground songs doesn't show the full picture. So anything, literally, however you want to word it, as long as you understand the solution that you made, that's all that matters. So now that we have our solution, let's look at the answer choices and see which one closely aligns with it. A says, to describe the similarities and differences between ragtime music and opera. No, we're not describing similarities and differences. To argue that more attention should be given to the lesser known works. I mean, I think that's pretty good. It's talking about how the lesser known works are important, and the answer choice B is saying more attention should be given to it. Just like the text says that if you don't listen to the lesser known works, you're missing the full range of Joplin's creativity. So I like that. Let's look at the other ones though. To encourage music lovers to listen to music by many different composers. Joplin is the only composer mentioned in the text. So many different composers is not what we should be talking about here. D says to explain how Joplin learned to compose and perform. It's not talking about the process he took to learn and compose. It's talking about, hey, these are his popular pieces. Don't sleep on these ones though. They're still good. And so B is the correct answer here, guys. So if you don't understand that, please rewatch, ask AI, ask your parents, your friends, whatever you need to do to understand why the answer to this question is B. Now here's the next one, guys. If you want to look at it yourself and try it, go right ahead. But I'm gonna go ahead and read it. So we can see it's a main purpose question because it asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. And you'll see there's a blurb here. I forgot to mention, not every main purpose question will actually have a blurb, but in this case, we have one, so let's go ahead and read it so we have context. The following text is from Lucy Montgomery's novel, Anne of Green Gables. Anne, an 11-year-old girl, has come to live on a farm with a woman named Maria in Nova Scotia, Canada. All right, that's the blurb. So now we have some context. Anne reveled in the world of color about her. "Oh, Maria," she exclaimed one Saturday morning, coming dancing in with her arms full of gorgeous boughs. "I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers. It would be terrible if we just skipped from September to November, wouldn't it? Look at these maple branches. Don't they give you a thrill, several thrills? I'm going to decorate my room with them." "Messy things," said Maria, whose aesthetic sense was not noticeably developed. "You clutter up your room entirely too much with out-of-door stuff, and bedrooms were made to sleep in." So my solution for this would be something along the lines of, Anne is so overjoyed by October and how beautiful the branches are, right? The maple branches. And then Maria is kind of killing her vibe. She's like, yo, go clean up your room. Like, your room's dirty. So literally my solution would be, Anne says, wow, look at these branches. And Maria says, go clean your room. That's literally my solution. That's what I think the answer could be. So let's start with A. The main purpose is to demonstrate that Anne has a newly developed appreciation of nature. Okay, Anne does clearly appreciate nature, but we have no evidence showing that it's a newly developed appreciation. Yes, she's exclaiming that October is such a beautiful month or whatever it may be, but we don't know that that's a new appreciation of nature. Maybe she's surprised by it for the 50th time, you know? So I don't like A. B says to describe an argument that Anne and Maria often have. The key word here is often, and that's the reason this answer choice is wrong. We don't know that this argument happens often. For all we know, this could be the first time they're arguing about it. C says to emphasize Maria's disapproval of how Anne has decorated her room. All right, if we look at the text, there's 2 sentences out of the entire passage that talk about Maria needing to talk to Anne about cleaning her room. So it's not a main purpose of the whole text. That's only talking about the last 2 sentences. We want to encapsulate everything, right? And that's why D is the best answer here, because it says Anne and Maria have very different personalities. This is very true because Anne is so overjoyed by the branches and Maria seems to not even be moved by it, right? So that's why D is the correct answer here. Let's move on to a harder question now. All right, here's the blurb. The following text is from Brant's 1847 novel. Jane, the narrator, works as a governess at Thornfield Hall. I went on with my day's business tranquilly, but ever and anon vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield, and I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. So basically, my solution here would be that she has thoughts of quitting Thornfield, which is her job, but she doesn't want to think about it. So let's look at the answer choices. To convey a contrast between Jane's outward calmness and internal restlessness. So we can see that Jane is calm because tranquil means calm, and internally, like in her brain, she is restless. So I like answer choice A. Let's look at B though. To emphasize Jane's loyalty to the people she works for at Thornfield Hall. So we don't even mention the people she works for. We don't talk about how she's loyal or anything like that. That's just dead wrong. C says to demonstrate that Jane finds her situation both challenging and deeply fulfilling. So you just can't really connect from I don't want to think about it to this is deeply fulfilling, right? This is probably the best looking answer choice out of the 4. And I think that's probably why a lot of people think this is a hard level question, which College Board ranked it a hard level question. But yeah, D Deeply fulfilling cannot be inferred here in this text, so it's just incorrect. D says to describe Jane's determination to secure employment outside of Thornfield Hall. She doesn't want to quit. Or like, she is trying to stop her thoughts of quitting Thornfield. So how can we even come to the conclusion that she's trying to be employed outside of it? That's not at all what the text is saying. So in this case, A is the correct answer. All right, this is the last main purpose one. Let's read the blurb. The following text is adapted from Jane Austen's novel, Mansfield Park. The speaker is considering staging a play at home with a group of his friends and family. We mean nothing but a little amusement among ourselves, just to vary the scene and exercise our powers in something new. We want no audience, no publicity. We may be trusted, I think, in choosing some play most perfectly unexceptionable. I have no idea what that means. And I can conceive no greater harm or danger to any of us in conversing in the elegant written language of some respectable author than in chattering in words of our own. So we see it's a main purpose question. Let's try to build our own solution here. We have Tom, and he says, we're just trying to have a little amusement among ourselves. We're just trying to entertain ourselves a little bit, and we're not trying to cause any harm. I think we may be trusted. Just something chill that we wanted to do with friends and family, right? So let's look at answer choice A. To offer Tom's assurance that the play will be inoffensive and involve only a small number of people. All right, so this doesn't really completely line up with the solution that I made, right? Because inoffensive means like it doesn't hurt people. And so that wasn't part of my solution, but this answer is supported by the text. So I want to keep it in mind because it could be correct if there's not a better answer. So let's look at B. To clarify that the play will not be performed in the manner Tom had originally intended. That's not at all what we're saying. We're just saying, oh yeah, we're just trying to entertain ourselves. It's not saying, oh yeah, this didn't go the way I want. So B is incorrect for sure. To elaborate on the idea that the people around Tom lack the skills to successfully stage a play. We're not talking about anybody lacking any skills. So that's dead wrong too. B and C are dead wrong. To assert that Tom believes the group performing the play will be able to successfully promote it. All right, we're not trying to promote it because we don't want publicity, right? It says right there. We want no audience, no publicity. So why would we want to promote it? D is dead obvious wrong. This is an important lesson to learn with hard reading questions. Your solution is not always going to line up with the right answer, especially when it's something where it can go so many different ways, right? Where it's so open-ended. You have to find the best answer in these choices. And so once you identify B, C, and D are just so completely wrong that there's just no way in the world that any of them can actually be correct, that's how you identify that A is the correct answer choice. The answer has evidence that supports it, and the other three just completely do not. And that's why A is correct here. Now we're moving on to paragraph structure, guys, all right? So the main thing with paragraph structure is to be specific with your answer choices. You have to select the answer choice that matches the structure in the right order. So yeah, one of them can say, oh yeah, Bill asked a question and then showed a hypothesis and then showed a conclusion. And then another one can say, Bill made a hypothesis, then asked a question, then showed the conclusion. Those all had everything happen, but they were in different orders. So you have to make sure the text aligns with the answer choice in the right order. And you can sort of build your own solution for these ones as well. It's definitely better to build your own solution than to just jump straight into the answer choices. If you're not going to write it down, at least try to have it in your head, right? All right, here's the first question. Feel free to try it on your own, just like any of these questions, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. And there's actually a blurb here too, so let's go ahead and read that. The following text is from Walt Whitman's poem, Calamus 24. I hear it is charged against me that I seek to destroy institutions, but really I am neither for nor against institutions. What indeed have I in common with them, or what with the destruction of them? Only I will establish in the Manhattan and in every city of these states, inland and seaboard, and in the fields and the woods, and above every keel, little or large, that dents the water, without edifices or rules or trustees or any argument, the institution of the dear love of comrades. So, as you can see, that the question is, which choice best describes the overall structure of the text? And that's how you know it's paragraph structure, when it asks for overall structure. So my solution would be something along the lines of, this guy is getting pressed for something that he says that he's neither for nor against, right? He's neither for nor against institutions, but people are saying, according to him, that he wants to destroy them. So basically, just from that alone, I can make my solution. And with that said, let's look at the answer choices. A says the speaker questions an increasingly prevalent attitude, then summarizes his worldview. No, he's not questioning an attitude. B says the speaker regrets his isolation from others, then predicts a profound change in society. He's not showing regret at all. The speaker concedes, I mean he doesn't, but we can keep reading. The speaker concedes his personal shortcomings, then boasts of his many achievements. He doesn't boast or concede. So that's double wrong. D says the speaker addresses a criticism leveled against him, then announces a grand ambition of his. Awesome, yeah. It does address a criticism against him when they say that he seeks to destroy institutions. But then he talks about an ambition of his in the second half of the text. Here's the next question. We have no blurb on this one, but let's get right into it. Why do sand cats purr but lions roar? Researchers hypothesize this difference between the two feline species may be partly due to a U-shaped bone in their throats called the hyoid. Sand cats, which are much smaller than lions, have a rigid hyoid that rumbles when the cat's larynx vibrates, resulting in a purr. By contrast, lions have a somewhat flexible hyoid, and the bone is attached to the skull with a stretchy ligament that sand cats lack. These traits allow lions and most other species of big cats to produce powerful roars. The same traits may also prevent most big cats from purring. Alright, so essentially we're saying sand cats purr, lions roar, here's why. That's literally the overall structure of the text to me. Let's look at the answer choices. The text presents a theory about two species, then discusses facts that weaken it. No, they don't weaken it. They're supporting. So that's dead wrong. B says, the text compares the habitats of two species, then explains how those habitats are changing. We're not talking about the habitats at all. We're talking about a bone in the feline species' throats. So B's dead wrong. C says, the text describes a behavior shared by the two species, then discusses other behaviors shared by them. So the first part of that's right. A behavior shared by the two species, right? The purring. But it's not discussing other behaviors shared by them. It's talking about their bone and kind of the differences, not behaviors that are shared. D says, the text poses a question about two species, then presents a possible answer. So if we can look back at the text, the first sentence in this text is a question, and it asks, why do sandcats purr but lions roar? And it actually goes on to answer that question. So that's why D is the best answer in this scenario. All right, let's try a harder one here. We have no blurb, so let's just get straight into the text. According to Indian economist and sociologist, the Eurocentric concepts that informed early 20th century social scientific methods, for example, the idea that all social relations are reducible to struggles between individuals, had little relevance for India. Making the social sciences more responsive to Indians' needs, this person argued, required constructing analytical categories informed by India's cultural and ecological circumstances. This person thus proposed the communalist Indian village as the ideal model on which to base Indian economic and social policy. I honestly struggled to read this a little bit, so I would probably have to go back. And in my opinion, this is a really important nugget for you guys, okay? Your brain is probably going to get tired after a couple questions, especially since this is likely going to be a harder module question. So you really have to think in terms of portions. You want to dissect the passage in its sentences or thoughts and put it in your own words. You don't have to write it down or type it. You can just do it in your head, put it in your own words so you actually understand what the text is saying before you read the answer choices. So for this question, we see that it says, according to this guy, these concepts had little relevance for India. So this guy gave his idea on how to fix that, right? He proposed the Indian village as the ideal model. So let's see which answer best supports that, now that we actually have an understanding and sort of an idea of what the answer might look like. The text recounts this person's early training in the social scientific disciplines and then lists policies whose implementation he oversaw. That doesn't make sense to me because why are we talking about the social policies and the social scientific disciplines? I'm just seeing this guy said, hey, this has little relevance for India. Here's how to fix it. I don't see how all that stuff comes into play. B says the text mentions some of this person's theories and then traces their impact on other Indian social scientists. So it doesn't trace their impact. That's where the question is just completely wrong. If any part of the question is wrong, you can cross it out. The text presents this person's critique of the social sciences and then provides an example of his attempts to address issues he identified. This is perfect because it talks about how he's critiquing, saying that it has little relevance for India, and then it's saying his attempt to address the issue by showing his proposal, by proposing the Indian village as the ideal model. So C is just beautiful here. D says that the text explains an influential economic theory and demonstrates how that theory was important to his work. How that theory was more important to his work than other social scientists have acknowledged. It's not comparing it to other social scientists. This person is the only one mentioned in the text entirely. So there's no one else acknowledged. D is just wrong. And that's why C is the right answer here, okay? Feel free to watch it back. Like I said, I know these are some tough ones, okay? All right, we see this as an overall structure, paragraph structure question. No blurb, let's get straight to it. These two people showed that high moonlight intensity inhibits the activity of the greater short-nosed fruit bat, a result explicable or explainable in terms of benefits and costs. Greater lunar intensity may not enable the bats to increase foraging success enough to offset the higher chance of detection by predatory owls or hawks. Most other nocturnal mammals respond to lunar intensity variations similarly to greater short-nosed fruit bats. But mongoose lemurs display the opposite pattern as their heavy reliance on visual foraging results in a different balance of reward and risk. So my solution here would be these bats seem to be more active while there's high moonlight intensity. And then it goes on to explain why in terms of benefits and costs. And then it goes on to say it doesn't help the bats increase foraging enough to offset the fact that they might get eaten by owls or hawks. And then it says that most other animals are just like bats, except for this one outlier, the lemurs. So let's read the answer choices. It discusses two different responses to the same natural phenomenon, explains why one of those responses occurs, and then suggests that the other response still needs to be explained. We're seeing one natural phenomenon, which is the activity being greater with high moonlight intensity, but we're not really talking about why it occurs, and we're not really talking about that the other response needs to be explained. So A is wrong. It describes and accounts for a finding, characterizes the finding as representative of a general pattern, and then describes and accounts for an exception to that pattern. So I like the end of this. It does account for an exception to that pattern. The beginning says it describes and accounts for a finding that is supported by the text, characterizes the finding as representative of a general pattern. So it does say most other mammals are the same as the bats. So yeah, it is representative of a general pattern. And so everything in here is supported by the text. It doesn't really go with my solution perfectly, but I like it, so let's keep it. Let's look at C though. It presents and explains the study result, indicates that the result is similar to the results of many other studies. It's not comparing to other studies, so we can immediately rule that out. D says it introduces an observation of a behavioral pattern, presents an explanation for the pattern, and then describes an exception to the pattern that cast out. Okay, this is kind of similar to B. So I'm stuck here between B and D. Let's read through each part of D though. It introduces an observation of a behavioral pattern. Yeah, it talks about activity of the bats compared to high moonlight intensity. Presents an explanation for the pattern. Well, it talks about how they're similar and the fact that they do get a higher chance of detection by owls or hawks. It does actually present an explanation for the pattern as well, because it talks about how the bats have a higher chance of detection by predators. But the thing that is incorrect about D is that it says it casts doubt on that explanation, which it actually doesn't. So that's why B is correct, because it does not cast doubt on that explanation. That's all you need to really get from this. Now we're on to the last segment of this video, which is sentence function, all right? So the really the only main thing I could say for this is to build your own solution. Once again, that's very important, and it will help you improve your score if you get good at it. For sentence function, I know it sounds kind of repetitive, but you have to find the sentence's job. You have to find what is the sentence doing in the text, and sometimes the answer choices will be like, oh yeah, it does this, which is later described in the next sentence or something like that. It'll talk about the sentence after or the sentence before. And so you also have to watch out for that and make sure that that's accurate. So let's start with this question. No blurb. Archaeological excavation of Market Street, Chinatown provided the first evidence that Asian food products were imported to the United States in the 1800s. Bones from a freshwater fish species native to Southeast Asia. So that's the evidence, basically. Hong Kong-based import-export firms likely coordinated the fish's transport from Chinese-operated fisheries in Vietnam and Malaysia to North American markets. This route revealed the often overlooked multinational dimensions of the trade networks linking Chinese diaspora communities. All right, bet. So the underlined sentence is basically talking more about how the products were imported into the US. So that's what I'm looking for in the answer. That's my solution. A says it explains why efforts mentioned remain inconclusive. Nothing's inconclusive here. So A has to be wrong. It provides information that helps support a claim about a discovery's significance that is presented in the following sentence. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. It's talking about the significance is presented in the following sentence. And also, the first part of it has to be correct too, so let's check it. Provides information that helps support a claim about a discovery's significance. So does it help support a claim? Yeah. It's going more in depth on how the products were imported. Is the significance presented in the following sentence? Yes. It's talking about how that reveals the multinational dimensions of the trade networks. So B is our correct answer. I mean, that's so beautiful. Let's double check C and D though, of course. C says it traces the steps that were taken. No, it doesn't. It's not talking about any steps. So it's not C. D says it outlines a hypothesis. There was no hypothesis even created here. Those answer choices just don't even look pretty, right? So B is our correct answer here. If you guys are struggling on anything, please feel free to leave it in the comments. I'll try to get back to you guys, but please go over it, figure out any way to get help on it, or just keep rolling it around until you understand it, all right? Here's the next one, no blurb, underline portion in the text. Generally, it takes tule geese about 4 days to migrate south for the winter. From their summer breeding grounds in Cook Inlet, Alaska, the birds begin by flying over the Gulf of Alaska, keeping about 100 miles from the Canadian shore. They pause to rest on the Pacific Ocean, then fly towards Summer Lake, Oregon, before finally arriving at the winter destination of Sacramento Valley, California. In 2020, however, it took the geese over twice as long to make their way. According to researchers, reason was airborne pollutants. The function of the underlined portion in the text, I would say, is it's talking about the birds starting their migration. So that's my solution. Let's see what the answer choices say. Illustrates a change in usual flight behavior. No. It's not a change in usual flight behavior. Suggests an explanation for why tule geese breed in Alaska. It's not talking about breeding at all. It describes part of the typical winter migration journey. Absolutely. It says, hey, geese usually take 4 days to migrate. They start at the Gulf of Alaska, 100 miles from Canadian shore. They pause to rest. It continues to talk about it, right? But the underlined sentence especially is talking about the start of their journey. So C is correct. D says it compares tule geese to other birds. No, it does not. Boom. C is correct there. Let's go to a harder underlined portion in the text question. Let's go ahead and read it. Scholarly accounts of the Chicano movement, a movement that advocated for social, political, and cultural empowerment of Mexican Americans and reached its zenith, or like its peak, in the 1960s and 70s, tend to focus on the most malicious, outspoken figures in the movement, making it seem uniformly radical. Geographer has shown, however, that if we shift our focus toward the way the movement manifested in comparatively low-profile neighborhood institutions and projects, we see participants espousing an array of political orientations and approaches to community activism. All right, this is a really wordy passage right here. I can't lie, I don't know what radical even means. So let's try to look at this and make up some sort of solution. Accounts of this movement tend to focus on a certain type of people. That's essentially what the underlying text is doing. It's talking about the certain type of people we're focusing on. So let's read the answers. It presents a trend in scholarship on the Chicano movement that the text claims has been reevaluated by researchers in light of Herrera's work on the movement's participants. I don't think it's presenting a trend. I think it's just trying to talk about the type of people that were in the movement that it's focusing on, right? It identifies an aspect of the Chicano movement that the text implies was overemphasized by scholars due to their own political orientations. Okay, it's talking about certain people being overemphasized, so I like that more. So let's hold on to it. Let's move to the next one. It describes a common approach to studying the movement that, according to the text, obscures the ideological diversity of the movement's participants. All right, so C says that it describes a common approach, and that is supported by the text because it says they tend to focus. So you can infer that it's a common approach there. And so you have to identify that it says obscures the ideological diversity of the movement's participants. So that's basically supporting the text because it says that these people seem uniformly radical. And while that's not underlined in the text, that is still part of the sentence, and that's supported. So I actually like C more. D says it summarizes the conventional method for analyzing the Chicano movement, which the text suggests creates a misleading impression of the effectiveness of neighborhood institutions and projects. So this one is saying that this approach creates a misleading impression of the effectiveness of neighborhood institutions and projects, but it doesn't say past scholarship made neighborhood projects look ineffective. The text didn't say that. So it's not talking about the diversity of the people, which is why D is wrong. So now when we look back at B, since we're between B and C, B says that scholars overemphasized radical figures due to their own political orientations. But the passage never tells us why they focused on those figures. So you can't assume that. And so that's why B is actually incorrect and C is the correct answer here. To be honest, this was a really difficult question, but if you understand this one, I'm really confident that you can score highly on text structure and purpose. Let's move on to the last question for this video, and it is a sentence function question, of course. So let's go ahead and read it. Historians have argued that a crucial component of the civil rights movement's success in the 1960s was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's Citizen Education Program, CEP, which invited promising activists from across the South to its one-week training sessions in Dorchester, Georgia. Led by experienced organizers such as Dorothy Cotton and Septima Clark, CEP attendees, more than 7,000 in all, participated in workshops on topics ranging from public speaking to legal doctrine before returning home and using their newly acquired knowledge to spearhead local civil rights initiatives. All right, so this one's a little less tough to read. You can kind of understand what it's saying pretty simply because it's talking about, okay, this movement's success is greatly because of CEP, which had more than 7,000 attendees in all. So we have to identify that it's really trying to emphasize how many people there are, right? That's the function of it. That's my solution. Let's read the answer choices. It underscores the extent of the impact on the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Yeah, exactly. It's talking about, oh yeah, there's so many people, so it's so impactful, right? B says it illustrates the organizers' efforts to educate participants on a wide variety of topics. So the main purpose wasn't the education aspect. So that's why B's incorrect here. It's less about education, and it's more about the actual civil rights movement. C says it suggests that CEP attendees held a diverse array of opinions about the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's political philosophy. I mean, there's a lot of people, so you could say there's diversity, but that's not the main thing that we're trying to get from this. D says it establishes that criticism of the CEP was limited to a few individuals. No, we're trying to say that it's a large amount, not a small amount. 7,000, right? So D is not correct. That's all I have for you guys today. I know that it might have been a bit of a large jump from the last video. Don't worry, because if you have a good understanding of this, you will not have as difficult of a time with the rest of the tougher reading passages. And so we have plenty more strategies to cover going into inferences, command of evidence questions, and I think you guys will be just fine, especially if you implement these strategies, especially the building your own solution. I think that goes for pretty much everything on reading, really. You can really use that for the majority of the reading questions, and so I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to share that with you. There are definitely more specific things for each question type that I'll be teaching in the rest of the videos besides just building your own solution. So please stay tuned. Please use this ball knowledge and apply it and practice it and understand it and do the hard questions and come back to the ones you don't understand and figure them out until you understand them, because that's how the 1600 comes to life, all right? I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.